Part 78. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 772. He is not allowed to touch or even ask about the affairs of foreign nobles. Gretel was awe-inspiring. The teacher had never used such a stern tone before to stop him from interfering with the affairs of the local nobles. Although he didn't want to care about it before. However, after all, he was directly involved in the establishment of the Public Health Management Office, using both soft and hard tactics to obtain money and power from those high-ranking officials. In the teacher's opinion, maybe if you get involved with public health, you might get involved with farming and raising food. Gretel thought for a while, but really didn't dare. The direction of public health is not the core interest of those nobles and temples. Pressing their heads, ordering them to accept the request of the parliament, organize manpower, take money from their pockets, and ask the god of nature to use magic to grow food. That is really their core interest. Whether it's asking them to bow to the parliament, asking outsiders to step into their territory, or asking them to cough up money. Let the things of the parliament be given to the parliament, the things of the temple to the temple, and the things of the nobility to the nobility. This is the consensus of all the major forces in the Kingdom of Kent, and it is also the founding statement on the stone tablet that was erected at the beginning of the Mount Igor mountain trail when the city of Nevis was first established. Although the parliament has reached an agreement with the royal family, the temple, and many sensible nobles for this action, there are hundreds of people and all kinds of people. There are always people who don't care about the life and death of civilians, but only care about their own sphere of influence being violated. There are always people who want to take advantage of the famine to annex the properties of free people and small proprietors to increase their own wealth. There are always some people who are simply lazy and don't want to work more. After all, no matter how severe the famine is, the nobles themselves will not be hungry. These nobles went to have their heads laid one by one before the Great Famine came. The cost of breaking the existing rules was not something that even the entire parliament could easily pay. I understand, teacher, he nodded honestly. I won't get involved in this kind of thing. Now I can't afford to get involved. All he can do is to protect himself, the people around him, and at most, expand a little to protect the people around him who care about him. Bernard Greet walked out of the small train station at the foot of Igor Peak. The first thing he did was to ask his loyal barbarian guard. I remember that I asked you to write to your tribe and ask them to stockpile enough food for 2 years. How is it now? No reply yet, boss, the barbarian replied distressedly. You also know that it is common for us to send a letter back and forth for 2 or 3 months. If there are some surprises along the way, it is not unusual for there to be no reply for half a year. In fact, if it is not very urgent, it is normal for there to be no reply for a year. Greet rubbed her temples. When Bernard came to him as a guard, the agreed reward was to give them enough food for their tribe every year. But if his tribe is slow to react, or doesn't believe Bernard's message, at the beginning of next year or in the middle of the year, when the famine really comes, even if you have gold coins in your hand, you won't even be able to buy a bite to eat. Forget it, Gretel sighed. Bernard, you can send another person, it doesn't matter how many more people you send. I will still pay them wages for this trip, and the travel expenses will be paid separately. Tell them to bring all the people from your tribe back, and I will pay them all higher. Bernard opened his mouth but stopped talking. Greet rushed to say. Being a security guard, a washerwoman, raising horses, cows, and pigs, there is always work for them. It doesn't matter if they really don't want to come back. Let them bring enough gold coins to buy food for 2 years, no, 3 years. Buy enough food for 3 years and send it to your tribe at once. Seeing his unquestionable expression, Bernard could only put away his refusal and bowed to agree. Gretel smiled and patted him. Hey, anyway, this gold coin is no longer a big figure for me now. If your people can have enough to eat, you can feel at ease, and I can feel at ease too, isn't it good? Speaking of which, if you advance to level 8 warrior, I haven't given you a salary increase yet. Okay, boss. Greet, and he rode the silver moon deer together and rushed back to Oak Grove Hospital. The first thing I did after returning was to ask Leon Carlos, the hospital's executive director and chief steward, who has advanced to a third-level mage. How much food does our hospital consume every month, including medical staff and inpatients? This problem does not trouble the hospital housekeeper at all. Just as he was about to open his mouth to answer, Gretel raised a finger to stop him. Calculate the total quantity needed from now to next year. Grain and meat that can be stored for a long time should be purchased at twice, no, 10 times the standard, and stored first. Yes, Sir Carlos checked the record without any intention of questioning. Gretel continued to crack his fingers. For the people led by Bernard, if you have 10 times the current number, you can save enough food and meat for 2 years. No, forget it, save enough for 3 years. Yes, sir. These things don't have to be purchased immediately. Before the end of this year, they will be purchased slowly in batches. The storage work must be done well to ensure that until next year, no, the year after next, spring famine is also terrible. Before the autumn harvest the next year, everyone has something to eat, so they won't go hungry. Yes, sir. Carlos has already begun to quickly calculate in his mind how big a warehouse should be built to meet his husband's requirements. 1 room with 2 rooms is not enough, 3 rooms with 4 rooms is not enough, and a cellar needs to be dug. The gentleman is kind-hearted and cannot bear to see the poor without food. At that time, poor pregnant women will not leave the hospital, and they will have to give out a few more handouts. If there really is a great famine, and the savages come to join Captain Bernard, according to Mr. Bernard's temperament, he will probably accept as many as he can. A group of hungry savages. Carlos is already thinking about how to purchase 2 to 3 times the amount of grain and meat with twice the money. Then he heard the answer. By the way, you don't have to buy meat. You can buy more fish. If it's not easy to store, hire people to pickle the salted fish and give them a fish for a few days as payment. You can also buy a few more barrels of whale oil, which is included in the food. With enough fat, people will not be hungry easily and can save grains. Great idea, a bucket of fish is much cheaper than the same weight of beef. However, Carlos could not bear to sneer. Sir, why do you think that the kind of sea fish bought in large vats needs to be marinated by someone? Without enough salt, it would be impossible for them to be preserved in the port. Storage enough vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, carrots, beets, cabbage, these can be stored for a long time. I will fill the cellar. I have half a year's worth of vegetables. It can also supplement vitamins. The voice behind was drowned in fragmentary thoughts such as, should I make a batch of vitamins in advance, or vegetables can still grow in the year without summer. Alas, when the epidemic had just come to an end, food stocking strategies were shared online. What else was needed to stock up? Milk, egg, or simply raise a batch of livestock yourself and stock up on feed. It is difficult for grass to grow well in a year without summer. How should we make silage feed? Indulging in community group buying, I have no intention of coding. Today I joined a group of bread, green leafy vegetables, eggs, rice, and pork. I don't know how many orders we can make. I did the antigen last night. I got up at 6 o'clock this morning to do the antigen and uploaded it to the group at 6:30. I was notified at 11 noon that I would do the nucleic acid test in the afternoon, but by 6 p.m. I had not yet done the nucleic acid test, so dinner was delayed. I need a nucleic acid code and an ID card. I scanned the nucleic acid code but couldn't find it, so I scanned the ID card again. At $%. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 773. Greed was 100% sure that even if the land was bare and starving, and the poor people in Nevis could only eat 100 grams of black bread a day, plus half a salted fish, it would never be possible in his mage tower. Lack of food. Not only is there no shortage, but you can also eat white bread if you want, and eat butter cookies if you want. Fresh fruits, vegetables, live-killed livestock, poultry, and fish, and various monster meats, if he wanted to, he would definitely be able to eat them that day. That's natural, no need to be surprised at all. His current status is that of the best in Nevis. In the previous life, not to mention Centurion black card customers, they could also be regarded as VIP customers of the bank. Even if everyone is locked up at home and not allowed to go out, they can still receive a 5-star hotel gift package. Of course, this high-level guaranteed treatment will only include him and the permanent population of his mage tower. Spellcasters in Oak Grove Hospital each have their own treatment according to their school and spellcasting level. As for the nurses, security guards, and even the frail poor patients, when there is a great famine, all you really have to do is ask for blessings. If the hospital does not ensure food supply, will we see these ordinary people become emaciated one by one, or even starve to death? Even when the washerwomen and nurses wanted to hide more bread and dried meat in their aprons to take back to their husbands and children, he could only turn a blind eye. He had no choice but to stock up more as the dean. Fortunately, he now has money and people. After the order was issued, a lot of gold coins were scattered, and naturally someone would plan, run errands, and do the work for him. When it's time to build a house, when it's time to dig a cellar, when it's time to lay out a magic circle, of course you also need to set up a magic circle. These warehouses containing alcohol can only be entered and exited with magic keys. No one except magicians, especially barbarians, are allowed in. They must not be allowed to steal wine. The degree of alcoholism of barbarians is no worse than that of dwarves. They are taller than dwarves and consume several times as much liquor as dwarves at one time. With famine on the horizon, the brewing industry has already implemented strict controls. That is to say, as the director of the hospital, he can get a batch of special supplies in the name of medical treatment. If a barbarian secretly drank half of this, he would be back in the hospital in a matter of minutes. The magician is still trustworthy. Anyway, in order to maintain mental stability, magicians drink less alcohol. As for moving boxes and doing rough work, aren't there still mage hands and skeletons? After Gretel finished his daily work, he was able to return to the mage tower and continue the hard work of perception training. Crack, crackle, crackle. High voltage, low voltage, strong current, weak current. Greet even asked Moss to intermittently switch between DC and AC, and intermittently switch the direction of the current. No need to inform him. Snapped. Ouch. Snapped. Ouch. It hurts. Week 1 of perception training. With 220 volts of alternating current, Gretel can accurately point out the copper wires passing the current with light magic from 5 meters away while blindfolded. However, the frequency of the current cannot be sensed. If it is replaced by direct current, the direction of the current cannot be sensed. Second week of perception training. With 220 volts of alternating current, the current direction can be sensed, but the frequency cannot be sensed. When the voltage is reduced to 110 volts, the current can be sensed, but the frequency cannot be sensed, and with direct current, the current direction cannot be sensed. Week 3 of perception training. Great progress. 36 volt AC, you can sense the copper wire passing through the current. As for the frequency issue, Greet thinks that maybe 50 Hz is too fast for him. 1/50th second is equal to 20 milliseconds. He can't react? Moss, lower the speed of the generator. Try reducing it to 120 RPM. Hey, I can feel it now. Hey, when Archmage Carlyle saw the AC engine before, he could immediately feel the changing direction of the current. What a keen perception this is. Sure enough, the higher you go, if your mental strength is not strong enough and your perception is not sharp enough, then you will be unable to make progress. Okay, 120 RPM, success. 180 RPM, successful. 240 RPM, successful. 300 revolutions per minute, wow, it's a bit difficult. Greed practiced hard for a week. Well, mental power can naturally increase with meditation, but the use of mental power really depends on practice. By the end of the 4th week, he could already sense 12 volts of voltage, as well as an electric spark randomly exploding on the intertwined power grid. The more I practice my perception, the more I can gradually touch the magical world. Greed finally understood why those magicians vigorously analyzed chemical elements and almost came up with a periodic table of elements. The magic classification was still the same. Magicians, especially low-level magicians, cannot perceive these subtle differences. Potassium, calcium, sodium, magnesium, and aluminum, zinc, iron, tin, lead and hydrogen. The hydrogen needs to be removed, copper, mercury, silver and platinum. The magician can roughly feel their lightness or heaviness, activeness or calmness. But the nucleus? The number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus? Electronic transition orbit. Sorry, this relies on mental perception and cannot be touched. Not only could Gretel not be able to touch it himself, he secretly asked his senior brothers and sisters if he could feel the existence of a smaller thing on a metal plate or in a bottle of solution. He responded with a blank look. So what is the limit of mental perception? Maybe 10 microns. Anyway, bacteria should not be visible directly. Otherwise, with the exploratory spirit of magicians, these microorganisms should have been discovered long ago. At the regular meeting on the 5th Monday, Gretel was full of confidence and stood in front of the Lord of Thunder. Bring it on. Whether it's a thunder net or a thunder maze, I'm not afraid. Then, Gretel's confident smile froze on his face. A hemispherical cover appeared in front of and beside the Lord of Thunder. Half virtual and half real, if there is something, if there is nothing. The space inside seems to be only a few meters away at first glance, dozens of meters away at another glance, and at least 100 meters in radius. Facing his direction, a small door with the height of one person was opened, and bright silver electric light intertwined with each other and flowed silently. Inside the small door, electric light was woven into the walls, roof, and ground, virtual and solid, and there were countless electric balls floating, and electric snakes and electric birds flying back and forth. The Lord of Thunder was wearing a standard black three-piece suit, sitting in front of the desk, nodding to him. Come in. No, teacher, where are you? Greed cautiously tiptoed inside. As soon as he walked into the light door, he turned his head and the office, chairs, and the senior brothers and sisters on the chairs all disappeared. Looking further ahead, nothing can be seen. Suddenly the white light surged, and suddenly it was pitch black. The lights in the dance hall were switched to shame. As for sound, there was no sizzle of electricity, no explosion of sparks, nothing. Come here. Come to me. The community is on the list again today, continue to cry. Thanks to the strong sea monster for the 1,500 starting coins reward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 774. Gretel stood still in fear. After sorting out my clothes, I first pulled up the hood, put on the mask, and put on the gloves. The clothes are specially made by him, with 2 layers inside and outside. The inner layer is long-sleeved trousers. From the bottom of the socks to the top of the hood, everything is sewn stitch by stitch with thick cotton, without any metal wires or metal sheets. The cuffs are tightened, and the ends of the trousers are tightened into the boots and tied firmly. Put on another pair of thick cotton gloves. All over your body, making sure not to expose any skin. The outer layer is made of extremely fine silver wire, interwoven with asbestos yarn, to make a set of clothes. Master Norwood personally took action, starting with pulling silver wire and asbestos yarn, and processing it bit by bit. Each component is carefully left with an interface and is firmly connected with a union. Make sure clothes, pants, gloves, socks, shoes, are connected to each other. Be sure to allow the entire body to form an equal potential to provide shielding protection. This outfit imitated the shielding suit for live work that I had seen in my previous life. The one in the previous life was used for 500 kV electric fields. With Gretel's body, it is estimated that walking within the 100 kV high voltage electric field can probably save one's life. If the voltage were higher. Forget it, the teacher should not be so cruel. 100 kV is equivalent to a high voltage of 100,000 volts, so it shouldn't be used to hit him. If this thing is not done well, strong current passing through the heart will really cause cardiac arrest. Arrange your clothes and give yourself another protection from energy damage on your backhand. If you think about it, it's not safe, and then add another elemental shield. Just as he was about to take a step, a small light ball floated and landed on the shield. Crackle! Elemental shield is annihilated, and protection from energy damage disappears directly. Yes, the protective magic has been lifted. Sure enough, using magic to cheat openly is still not possible. Teacher! Greet raised her voice with a grimace. Very far away, the voice of the Lord of Thunder came leisurely. The voice was vague and uncertain, as if echoing in any corner of the small space. Why are you so defensive? If the force that breaks through these shields falls on you, you will be injured more seriously. So what you mean, teacher, is that if I don't hold up a shield, you can hit me with the strength of a trainee level. It will only hurt but not hurt? If you put up a shield, the beating you will receive at that time may be the aftermath of the shield being shattered, and it will not be so light and easy. Fortunately, I was well prepared in advance. Gretel took a deep breath and moved forward. He couldn't use his eyesight or hearing. He could only try to spread out his mental power and form a hemisphere in front of him. Step by step, use your mental power to explore the front, hoping to find a way. Straight road ahead. Straight road. Go straight forward and after 3 steps the road turns to the right. 1, 2, 3, turn right. Very good, I successfully walked over without being shocked. Continuing forward, there are 2 forks in the road ahead, so where should we go? Gretel tried hard to push the hemisphere composed of mental power forward and forward. After covering the entire road, explore the path to the left and pass through 1 intersection, 2 intersections, and then hit the wall. This road is blocked. Explore the path to the right, forward, forward, turn left, turn right. Even though his mental strength was stretched to the limit, no danger was found. Great, go right. Greet quickened his pace, exploring with his mental power as he walked. 10 steps, 20 steps, 30 steps, 50 steps, the surrounding environment suddenly changed, and an empty hall appeared. Zilla zilla, the sound of slight electric sparks kept coming from all directions. Even though he was wearing a hood, Gretel felt the hairs on the back of his neck standing upright. Why don't you leave? A clear voice floated down from the top of the hall. Immediately afterwards, Greet heard a crackling sound a meter or 2 behind him. The mental power was withdrawn and expanded, with himself as the center and spreading in all directions. Gretel was instantly horrified. Behind him, slightly to the left, an electric dragon swung its tail and swung its head, already swimming within 2 meters. The long tail stood up and slapped on the ground, causing sparks to fly. On the left front and right front, there is a spherical lightning, floating up and down. Although it looks a bit like Brownian motion, the general trend is approaching. Run. The potential is squeezed out. Gretel had never pushed his mental power so far in a ring mode before. At this moment, his mental power reached out from all directions, reaching the wall of the hall and quickly covering it. There's an exit on the left. There's one on the right too. The electric dragon has already pounced. Gretel ran away, and as he ran, he stretched out 2 threads at the same time, exploring the way to the intersection on both sides. The electric dragon rose and fell, not swimming very fast, but it kept following him. Run a little slower and bite when you open your mouth. Gotta speed it up. The teacher is impatient. Gretel pounced forward, covering his face with both arms, and slid under a ball of lightning that floated by. At the same time, he pulled the spiritual thread as far as it could go. Hitting the wall on the left, there is a road on the right. Run. Turn right quickly. Greet got up, walked around half a circle, and rushed into the corridor on the right. Go straight, turn right, turn left, there is a roar, and lightning walls surround you. Teacher, there is no road here. Gretel shouted, raising his voice. There was a slight snort in the distance, and soon it became silent again. The Lord of Thunder leaned back slightly, leaning his head against a docile electric dragon, closing his eyes and feeling Gretel's movements. The use of mental power is indeed much better than before. The detection distance, extension speed, and coverage are all still the same. To be able to spread to this extent in the demi-plane where his meditation world merges with reality. It shows that his mental strength is still good, but he is just too lazy to use it. If you pump him a few more times and let him exercise more, he can still make some progress. When will Gretel realize that external objects will always be external objects, and only spiritual power is the foundation of a magician? The lightning wall shrank in all directions, and the space shrank smaller and smaller. Gretel stood in the center and rotated his mental power once and twice, finally confirming that there was really no gap this time. If I really want to say that there is, I can only say that it is a bit of a weak link. The current is strong in some places and weak in other places. The weak places become strong again soon, and the strong places sometimes become weak for a moment. Do you want me to seize the opportunity and rush out? Gretel gritted his teeth. He added acceleration technique to himself, and found that the teacher did not respond, so he added another cat's elegance. Hold your breath and concentrate, spread your mental power to the maximum, and feel the weak points of the power grid. 1, 2, 3, go. With a hood covering his head, he rushed out of the electric wall with a roar. The silvery white arc flows around the body, is guided by the shielding suit, and then returns to the power grid. Not far away, the Lord of Thunder slightly raised his lips and cursed with a smile. This little guy. There are many ways to cheat. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Ed for the 5,000 starting coins. Well, congratulations to everyone for collecting another 10,000 reward, more updates tomorrow. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 775. There was a buzzing in Gretel's ears, and his whole body felt a little numb. Thank God, it doesn't hurt. If there is no pain, it means there is nothing wrong with the shielding suit and it has not been penetrated. But this numbness is still a bit scary, so even if you wear a shielding suit and pass through a strong electric field, you won't feel nothing? Gretel spread out his mental force field, explored, evaded, rushed, ran, jumped, pounced and jumped. It was still a hall at first, but gradually turned into a narrow corridor, with lightning striking from time to time on the corridor. From time to time, there were ball lightning rolling around, and electric crows, electric snakes, and electric dogs were flying and biting. Small electric beads one by one, like the tert-butyl lithium solution on fire in a chemical factory, split and merged without warning. Gretel was sweating profusely from running. Flash left. Flash right. Emergency stop. Fall down and slide over. Get up quickly and run again. Use your mental power to weave a protective shield, hit it hard, and rush through the section. You can't dodge this ball lightning, condensate your mental power into a whip and whip it away. Oh, success. Is this playing Tien Tien parkour or temple escape? Greet complained silently, but did not dare to say a word or stop. He was panting and running all the way. Hey, it feels like all the exercise for a year has been consumed here. I am a mage, not a warrior. I don't know how long I ran, until Greet felt that his whole body was numb and could not lift his legs, when his eyes suddenly darkened. Strictly speaking, it was not a darkness, but a seemingly endless maze of lightning that was finally left behind by him. In the center of the open space, the Lord of Thunder was sitting leisurely at the table, playing with a gem the size of a pigeon egg. On the desk in front of him, a small silver spoon was leaning in a coffee cup, and the freshly baked muffins next to him were dripping with honey, and the aroma was overflowing. Teacher. It took all Gretel's willpower not to bend down, hold up his knees and gasp for air. The Lord of Thunder raised his eyes slightly, and without making any movement, a seed naturally grew on the ground. Silver and white are intertwined, with a slight hint of light blue on the edge. The blazing electric light forms the back, seat, armrests, and four legs of the chair. There is no spark of electricity in the intertwining, and the flow is as gentle as water. Sit. In an instant, Gretel felt that every one of his half-long hair stood on end, almost lifting up his heavy hood. Never mind. The teacher will never harm me. I have to believe in the control power of the legendary mage. He can use electricity to make a chair and let me sit on it, so my life will not be in danger. Greet comforted himself in this way, and with fear, he crossed his legs into a horse stance, assumed a deep squat posture, and lowered his body height little by little. 10 centimeters, 5 centimeters, 3 centimeters, 1 centimeter. My fingertips quickly touched the chair surface, but I wasn't shocked. If I touch the armrest of the chair again, it will be fine. Hey, sit on the chair. There was no numbness, no electric current running through the body, and I didn't fall down either. Go back a little further and put down 1/3 of your buttocks, half of your buttocks, most of them. Hey, when other people sit in the electric chair, they are electrified chairs. When the switch is pressed, the current appears. When I sit in the electric chair, it is really a chair made of electricity and volleyed in the air. Fortunately, this electric chair won't kill me, huh? However, a chair made of pure electric current instead of wires can still support my weight. What is the principle? Do you understand? The teacher's voice suddenly sounded. Gretel was startled and almost jumped up on the spot. He quickly sat down and faced the Lord of Thunder, shaking his head quickly. I don't understand. I don't know how this current is restrained. It doesn't look like an air wall, or a force field, or any insulation method I know of. Having said this, seeing that the Lord of Thunder seemed a little dissatisfied, he quickly added. It doesn't seem to be splitting space. If it were space, I would have been cut into several pieces. It would be impossible to sit like this, right? Wait, is it a magnetic field? Could it be a magnetic field? The magnetic field should also be able to restrain the current. Yes, but how can you press it so hard that it is close to the current? The teacher's expression finally softened. Gretel felt relieved as the Lord of Thunder slowly said. You can think of magnetic fields, so you have some brains. Well, after practicing for the past month, what do you think? My impression is, you can really see a lot with mental power, things that you can't see in other ways, Gretel answered honestly. Some of the ways elements exist and flow in nature and inside the body cannot be seen by existing observation methods and can only be perceived with mental power. If you use your mental power more, you can see a different world. Yes, the Lord of Thunder sighed. The advancement route you are taking is different from that of ordinary magicians. The level is low now, and you don't feel much yet. The higher you go, the more important your mental power becomes. For example, a magician above level 15 must the meditation world is integrated with the real environment. He was slightly lost in thought for a while, as if sorting out his thoughts and recalling the length and difficulty of taking this step. Greet listened with bated breath for a while before hearing the teacher continue. If you want to absorb elements from the environment and materialize your own meditation environment, on the one hand, you must have a cognition of the world as close as possible to the real world, so that the meditation world can absorb it automatically. On the other hand, you must have a strong enough perception can be modified and corrected proactively. I think I might rely more on the former path. Gretel said silently in his heart. When you reach the realm of the Nine-Ring Mage and prepare to step into the legend, you must have the most detailed understanding of your body and spirit. The flow and changes of magic power in the body and the transformation of the body can only use mental power to observe, there is no other way so far. Gretel raised his eyes suddenly, then lowered his eyes silently. There is no other way now, but it doesn't mean there will be no other way in the future. Once upon a time, humans could not observe infrared rays, ultraviolet rays, X-rays, gamma rays, protons, neutrons, and electrons. But for magicians, many things can be observed with mental power, so they do not develop other methods. In a sense, it can also be said to be path dependence, which constrains their development route. However, developing new methods means a huge investment, which means that natural science research is booming and iterates quickly. At present, the glorious Holy See has not been overthrown, and a large part of the Parliament's expenditures have to be spent on military expenditures. Do they have the time, energy, and money to spend on basic research? His disapproval and hesitation to speak were completely seen by the Lord of Thunder. But in the opinion of this legendary mage, Gretel's use of mental power so far is not too much, but too little. So the teacher continued to lecture. If your mental power doesn't improve, you won't be able to do a lot of research after you reach a high level. For example, electron flow dash. He waved his fingertips lightly, and a dazzling lightning flashed across the sky, tearing through the darkness. The Lord of Thunder said slowly. If your mental power is not strong enough and delicate enough, you will not be able to sense the electron flow at all. If you cannot sense the electron flow, you will not be able to sense the outline of the object left by the electrons hitting the object. And some very small things can only this is how you can see. Gretel slowly opened his mouth. Electricity, electron microscope? Teacher, I just let my senior brothers and sisters feel the electron flow, and you came up with an electron microscope? Transmission electron microscope? Scanning electron microscope? Cryo-M. Scanning tunneling electron microscope? Teacher, I want this. I want to see the virus. I want to see all kinds of tumor cells. I want to see the DNA molecule. With the electron microscope, I can see if there are any changes in the DNA of ordinary people and the DNA of extraordinary people. Teacher, what small things did you see? Cells. The structure inside the cells, he couldn't hide his excitement, and his voice trembled a little. Or something smaller than a cell. What does the thing you see look like? Can you let me take a look too? Can you? Practice yourself and see for yourself when you're done. It's over, the teacher is going to explode. Gretel instantly shriveled up. That is a teacher, a legendary mage, and a living person. It is not an electron microscope in the study laboratory, allowing them to take a look and touch it. Besides, the world's first electron microscope is probably 10 million times more difficult for an ordinary 985 university master's student to touch than it is for him to convince the legendary mage. It seems that I heard a tutor say in school before that a certain university invited a professor who was close to the Nobel Prize level to return to China. One of the promises he made was that the country would provide scientific research funds to buy him a cryo-electron microscope. That's not something he deserves to play with. He should work hard to advance and improve his mental power. Judging from the senior sister's appearance, maybe when he reaches level 16, he can rub an electron microscope with his own hands. Or it would be faster to work out the principles and go to the alchemy guild to make one. The thoughts that were flying so fast were quickly brought back. Opposite the desk, the Lord of Thunder raised his hand slightly, and the gem he was playing with drew an arc and fell into Gretel's arms. "You did a good job this time." Gretel was in a hurry, and as he quickly picked up the gem, the teacher's praise floated over his head. "I have seen the report given by the Parliament. Except for the share of ammonia production and the sale of new drugs, which the Parliament will directly settle with you slowly in the future, the rest of the remuneration has been transferred to me and is converted into this." He raised his chin slightly and tapped the alexandrite in Greet's palm. "This magic crystal comes from the young son of the totem beast we killed this time. The level is about half a step legend, but the essence is quite pure. There is not so much blood and sin, and it is suitable for you to activate the healing technique. Well, you still have. Is there anything else you want?" "The gem is the size of a pigeon egg, transparent and clean, and feels warm to the touch. Turning slightly, a ring of cat-eye-like brilliance circulates, like an eye opening and closing." Gretel could feel the deep and huge power inside when he exerted a little bit of his spiritual power. If the beast's soul has not dissipated, it is probably residing in this gem, staring at the world with this eye. One can imagine how precious it is. Logically speaking, this gem is more than enough to compensate for all his previous contributions. Greet estimated that even the prediction of the volcano and the globe containing the monsoon and ocean current systems may be included in it. Logically speaking, he shouldn't make any more requests. But Gretel blurted out, "Teacher, can you use that electronic stream to help me read something?" Roll. The half-virtual and half-real world suddenly dispersed. Greet sank his feet, fell back into the study, and ran away with his head in his arms. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. I didn't go to bed until 12:30 last night. The meat purchased in a community group, fresh meat, was cut and delivered in the middle of the night. When I arrived at 12:30, volunteers carried it to the door. So tired. Thanks at Handsome is not very obvious for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 776. Greet held the gem in his pocket and stayed with the last person honestly, listening to the reports from his brothers and sisters on their recent research. In the palm of his hand, the heavy warmth and vitality kept reminding him. The use of mental power still needs to be practiced, and it needs to be practiced all the time. This time it's the lightning maze. The next time the teacher catches me not practicing properly, I won't be able to tell what kind of maze it will be. It might be fire, ice, light, lightning, acid, sound waves, force fields, multiple types of attacks, surrounding him from all sides, watching him rolling and crawling. By then, there will be no such thing as a shielding suit. Gretel. Ah. Teacher. What's going on with your clothes? It doesn't have any spell fluctuations and can resist 2-ring electrical magic. Why didn't I see your paper? This is very simple. The teacher's eyes glanced over like cold lightning. Greet quickly changed his words. Okay, Teacher, I'll write it as soon as possible. I'll hand it in at the regular meeting next week. That's it, another article has been added to the to-do list. I don't know if the teacher will be angry if Aurora writes this paper. By the way, what is the principle of the Faraday cage? Equal potential? The concept of electric potential, how far has research progressed in the world? As soon as the regular meeting was over, Greet exited the teacher's office and stuck directly next to senior sister Philby. Following each step, every one of senior sister's disciples was pushed to the back by him. What's the matter? You want me to write for you? That's not possible. Senior sister glanced over leisurely, her eyes changing, and she seemed to be smiling but not smiling. Greet shamelessly took another step closer. Senior sister, please give me some extra theory lessons. Don't you want these clothes? Do you really don't want them? There is no magic fluctuation, but it can resist the second ring lightning magic. What magician wouldn't want that? In case the magic defense is broken, this is the last line of defense. Don't want to. Ugly. Senior sister answered straightforwardly. The tone was so crisp and sharp that Gretel's eyes went dark. How ugly is it? How ugly? Although it is not in the form of a robe that magicians are accustomed to, but the top and trousers are separated into two parts, it looks like it is worn by workers doing manual labor. The tailoring does not tighten the waist or flatter the body shape at all. It is round and chubby, and the whole person looks fatter when wearing it. No dyeing, no embroidery, no pockets, buttons, chains or any decorations. The whole thing is gray, not much different from the linen clothes worn by the poor. Okay, it's really ugly. But these are functional clothes, not decorative. Senior sister, you can't use fashion requirements to block it. So little Gretel, what is the purpose of this dress? Senior brother Burbo's smiling voice floated from afar. Don't listen to your senior sister, she won't talk, I will. If this thing is easy to make and everyone can have one, then give each of those guys one piece. At least it can stop them from committing suicide, right? Hello. The two archmages turned and glared at each other. Crack, crackle, crackle, sparks exploded quietly. Gretel lowered his head silently and stood aside. This thing is so simple to make. Don't hold me back. If you two archmages above level 16 start a PK on the spot, I won't be able to stop you. In the end, Archmage Philby coerced Gretel into her laboratory on the grounds that I am electromagnetic, and studying electrical spells is my specialty. The senior fellow apprentice, on the other hand, faced Archmage Philby's eyes and followed him swaggeringly. After taking off Gretel's shielding suit, Archmage Philby couldn't wait and pointed at it. Sizzling, lightning is flowing. The two great mages stood side by side, one on the left and the other on the right, their eyes lighting up at the same time. Gretel also learned from them, letting go of his mental power to feel the lightning flowing on the shielding suit. In the induction of mental power, powerful electric energy surged out from the Archmage's fingertips, fell on the shielding suit, and immediately turned into thousands of strands and spread out. Follow the thin silver threads in the fabric and flow into every corner of the clothes. Then, it circled on the silver thread, but not a bit leaked to the inside. Two sharp eyes fell on Gretel. Gretel quickly raised his hand. I said. The principle is dash. You don't need to explain the principle, senior brothers and sisters said in unison. Tell me what to do. Okay, actually, it is made of very thin silver wire mixed with flame-retardant fiber. I used asbestos silk, to make a piece of clothing. Gretel quickly explained the method. Connect them all on clothes, pants, shoes, hoods, everywhere. Try to connect as many connections as possible so that the current can be evenly distributed to every place. It seems quite convenient. Yes, and it doesn't use much silver wire. Archmage Philby waved her hand, and the mage's hand flew over, picked up the protective suit and weighed it. It's not too heavy. The whole suit only weighs a little more than 4 pounds. The silver thread used in it is less than half. 2 pounds of silver is equivalent to 30 or 40 silver coins. The laboratory can still afford this amount of money. Not to mention that the laboratory can afford it, everyone can afford the magician who is qualified to enter the Archmage's laboratory. As for asbestos silk, that counts as money? Gretel shook his head slightly. The principle of the shielding suit is not difficult, of course, how to write it is another matter, the design is also simple. However, the technical difficulties involved in making the finished product are another matter. The key is that the silver wire must be pure. If there are impurities, the resistance will be high. And it must be drawn very thin and evenly. As long as it is uneven, the resistance will be different. The same current will have different voltages. If they are different, it will easily break down. Archmage Philby frowned slightly and suddenly waved. From somewhere nearby, a silver cup flew over. During the flight, it quickly deformed and softened. Pull out a hair-thick silver wire and connect one end to the mouth of the cup and the other to the foot. There are about 10 roots that are smooth and uniform, and there are about 10 roots that are lumpy and uneven in thickness. Obviously, the Archmage deliberately controlled it for comparison. A scream sounded in the distance. My cup! Ah, teacher! He stopped shouting in the middle of the call. Archmage Philby seemed to be unknown. She waved her hand again, and an electric bead flew out from her fingertips. It split into small beads in mid-air and dripped on each silver thread. The lightning flashed past instantly. The Archmage stared at the current without blinking and nodded slightly. You're right. The silver wire is stretched unevenly. As long as the diameter difference exceeds 1/10, there will be obvious differences. Tisk, such a thin silver wire. I asked Master Norwood, the 5th level transformation mage in our mage tower, to do it for me. Greet added the explanation in due course. If we want low-level alchemists or even ordinary people to participate in the production, the required processing accuracy will be greatly improved. Maybe we need to talk to the Alchemy Guild. The two archmages frowned at the same time. Master Norwood is a follower of Gretel, so it is normal to help him make something casually without charging money. However, it is impossible to make large quantities of shielding suits for the Lord of Thunder without charging money. Let a 5th level transformation mage do this with his own hands. Can the laboratory's finances support it? Or should we let these magicians think a little better and put up their defenses? If they don't put up their defenses, they deserve to be electrocuted. Gretel turned his head silently. If the shielding suit made by Master Norwood is based on the cost of a 5th level mage, a set of 500 gold coins is a friendly price. Mass production can reach 200 to 300 gold coins, but it cannot go any lower. It can be exchanged for a 500 kilovolt high voltage shielding suit in the previous life, which costs 2,000 to 3,000 yuan a set. It's lighter than it is, it can handle higher voltage than it is, and it lasts longer than it. The power of large-scale industrialization is really more powerful than workshop-style small handicraft industry. There are so many. Actually, not only does this kind of silver thread have to be stretched very thin, but it also doesn't last long. Gretel continued to pour cold water on them. Silver is easy to oxidize. Once oxidized, the resistance will not meet the standard. When the resistance is high, heat will be generated when current passes through, and it will burn quickly. Even if it does not burn, it will not have a shielding effect. Moreover, the thinner the silver wire, the larger the specific surface area. The larger the specific surface area, the faster the overall material oxidizes. My shielding suit was just made last week. I made 2 pieces together. The first one was for a doll and an experimental animal. After a round of testing, Aurora and I finished a round of attacks. I used it. Later I found out that the silver wire was too thin and it broke. The two archmages looked at each other, and then let out a long sigh. Archmage Philby spread her hands. Then forget it. Little Gretel, don't you want to hear the principles of electric spells? Come on. Greet moved a stool, listened obediently, and returned with a head full of spells, elements, and magic circles. Thank God, in this world, we already have the concept of electric potential. Although the understanding of magicians is that the lightning falling from the sky is falling from a relatively high potential energy to a relatively low potential energy. Powerful lightning magicians can directly sense it with their mental power. It's like they sense the electric potential on the shield suit. When a beam of current falls, a uniform and stable electric field can be achieved on every silver wire of the entire shielding suit in an instant. Gretel put away the shielding suit, happily said goodbye and left. Thanks to my senior sister's explanation, this paper can be submitted in 2 days. It doesn't take a week. Senior sister is a great person. It saved him a lot of time searching for information. He swayed, his feet were light, almost humming a tune. In the laboratory, the two archmages looked at each other for a while and discussed in low voices. Do you recommend that he publish this paper? I think it's better not to do it. It's too weakened for our thunder horn, especially the thunder branch. The second level spell is immediately useless. It's silent, there is no spell fluctuation, and you can't even defend it. I think it doesn't matter if you take it out. Just like little Gretel said, the cost is too high and it's too easy to be invalidated. What if we just let them explore slowly? No, we are all our own people. Or, can we publish the paper and inform the parliament privately? Forget it, let's ask the teacher to persuade him not to publish the paper. As for the loss, can each of us make up for it? 3,000 words. Add more complete. Today I suddenly discovered that there are already 465 votes. It is said that the monthly votes will be doubled at the end of this month, so continue to ask for votes. 2 updates will be added for 2,000 votes, 4 updates will be added for 3,000 votes, 6 updates will be added for 4,000 votes, and so on. I hope to get at least 3,000 votes this time. Please vote. Another bunch of vegetables arrived today, including 4 types of green leafy vegetables: greens, lettuce, celery, and lettuce. In addition, lettuce leaves can also be eaten as green leafy vegetables. 2 zucchini, a big long white radish, 2 cucumbers, a bunch of lentils. A giant lettuce. I can hold on for a long time again. Kaizen carrot. Carrot. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 777. Gretel didn't know what his brothers and sisters were talking about, and of course, he wouldn't care if he knew about it. He doesn't lack this paper. As long as he can hand it in to the teacher, he won't send it out. He is now busy practicing his spiritual power every day. There is one thing to say, there are still great benefits to practicing mental power diligently. At the very least, Gretel found that when he studied DC cardioversion and electric defibrillation techniques, it went much more smoothly. At the very least, he could directly feel the beating of his heart without relying on an electrocardiogram. Once the electric claw technique is over, whether the heart is rejuvenated or injured, it will lie flat. He doesn't need to look at the electrocardiogram to calculate the front wall, back wall, atrium, and ventricle. His mental power can give him the answer directly. Come on, Greet. Use your mental power more precisely and more delicately. Try to feel the pulse from the sinoatrial node, which is conducted along the atrium wall to the ventricle, and feel the process of the electrical impulse returning to the atrium and sinoatrial node after the atrium and ventricle contract. Although he can't do it yet, he can feel the contraction and relaxation of the heart, and the inflow and outflow of blood, but he can't feel the current and myoelectricity of the heart yet. Alas, you have to work hard and strive to advance. If you want to use CT or electron microscope by hand, you must become a high-level mage. If possible, strive to become a legend. Greet immersed himself in the study of medicine and magic. Time passes silently, day after day, month after month. From spring to summer, from summer to autumn, finally, the fluttering snowflakes cover the earth again. Scale of glory, Ms. Ophelia turned over lazily in the soft cloud nest. The cold wind blew against the face, making the silver dragon who loved the cold feel very comfortable. She glanced at the vast expanse of frozen sea, bent her long neck, buried her head under the dragon wings, and whispered softly. Winter came a little early this year. Fortunately, the big fish and large monsters have been stocked up, and the little guys have something to eat after they hatch. It doesn't matter if you are short of food. Silver Dragon is still very confident in his hunting ability. Fly 100 or 200 miles and dive into the sea, where there are endless big fish to hunt at any time. To the east of the dragon's lair, thousands of miles away in the wilderness, a large gathering of barbarian tribes was hurriedly breaking up. The barbarian elders shouted to their tribesmen to quickly pack their luggage, load their cars, and rush back to the tribe. Elder Brock, wearing a feather cloak and a feather crown, stood at the gate of the camp to see him off. He stretched out his hand to catch a snowflake, and his old face was filled with deep worry. This year's winter has come too early. Akula's last big hunt has only been completed less than half, and there is not enough meat. This winter, many small tribes will be sad. As early as half a year ago, they had received a warning from the council and a letter from Grettir, warning them that there will be a great famine next year. They must find ways to stock up on food. But how can it be that easy? The barbarians are located in the far north, and farming is basically a joke. They make a living by fishing, hunting, and robbing. Stocking up on food. It wiped out all the wild animals around it, and it took 10 years for it to recover. It's not that easy to rob. Even if the nearby Rhine Kingdom and the tribes further east of the Rhine Kingdom could grab a wave, it would still cost the blood and lives of the tribal warriors. If there are too many people dying in the wilderness, they will be the target of others to annex them. Even if the robbery was successful by luck and not too many people died, how would you bring it back after the robbery? Gold, silver, and jewelry are easy to carry, but grain, salt, and livestock are all heavy goods that take up space. Traveling across the ocean and then traveling thousands of miles over land, more than half of it will be lost along the way. I hope next spring will come early. The reindeer can eat grass, there will be salmon swimming in the river, the mountains will turn green, and the wild animals in the mountains will grow up smoothly. King Rothaga of the Dwarf Kingdom stepped out of the melting pot for the first time in several months and stood on the top of the mountain looking into the distance. Even with all his eyesight, he could not see the holy mountains in the distance. He could only see the wavy mountains, which were dyed silvery white overnight. The mountain peak where the melting pot is located is not bad, has abundant geothermal heat, and has not yet been covered by heavy snow. King Rosger recalled the food stored in the royal court and breathed a sigh of relief. At least he believed the news from Greet and used the royal court's funds to purchase and reserve a large amount of grain. At present, it seems that even if the worst happens, Wang Ting should still have enough. Max, come with me to check the warehouse to make sure that there is enough food and that it has not been touched, especially that it has not been stolen by those guys to make wine. The Dwarf King in his prime organized his thoughts and issued orders one by one. Ingvar, you send the Blue Sheep Knights to patrol within 500 miles of the royal court. Winter comes too early this year, and I'm afraid some people are not prepared. The Firehammer tribe, Steelhammer tribe, and Silverbeard tribe who live in the royal court should be enough. Under extreme circumstances, the dwarves living nearby can also take appropriate care of it. As for other tribes, Gavin, pick a group of people and go to other tribes outside the royal court to find out the situation, the Ironbone tribe, the Wild Hammer tribe, especially the Black Rock tribe that caused trouble last time. Question them all. Winter has just begun. If they don't have enough food, it's probably not too late to start buying and hoarding now. He let out a long sigh. According to Gretel's letter, the crops will fail next year. Not only will crops fail to grow, but even pasture will grow poorly, and livestock will die in large numbers. I don't know, fellow barbarians, are you ready now? Some of the barbarians hoarded grain, some marinated meat, and some sharpened their knives and axes. On the border of the Rhine kingdom, the old Sky Knight White Wolf William put on his best armor and stood for a long time, looking to the north. We must step up our vigilance from now on. Intensify our troop training, the old man's majestic roar echoed like thunder on the towering city. Winter has come so early, those barbarians will definitely come and rob. Gather all the villagers, those who can enter the city, and those who can enter the fortress, enter the fortress. Those who really can't enter, build strong village walls. This winter, I don't know how many young men under my command will have to sacrifice, the support from the glorious Holy See is limited. Should we sneak in another batch of penicillin? Frostflower Veronica Rudolph tightened the reins, with a hint of sadness in her brows. Fortunately, her defense area should not be under great pressure when faced with the Black Forest ruled by the vampires. The vampires don't really need to eat food. The poor people under their control starve to death. As long as they don't feel the pain, they probably won't go all out to grab it. However, even so, thinking of the future situation, this 12th level knight couldn't help but sigh. Forget it, let's postpone the wedding for another year, now is really not the time to get married or pregnant. The community has officially become a closed area, I have been filled with negative energy this morning. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Please comfort me. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 778. The cold wind from the far north blew along the land and ocean. Among the 7 princes of the Rhine kingdom, the Golden Lion Duke of Saxony and the White Wolf Count Ascan have made as much preparation as possible. Stock up on food, stock up on supplies, organize storage. In fact, the parliament revealed some vague information to the mainland's powerful nobles who were slightly inclined to them. Whether they listen, act or not, and how far they can go, is their business. It has to be said that a great lord who can independently rule a territory, gather small nobles internally, appease the people, fight enemies externally, and both win over and defend against the glory Holy See always has enough brains. Not to mention that it will be enough for 2 years, at least if there is a problem with next summer's harvest, I can still buy another one, and I hope for autumn harvest. As for problems with the autumn harvest, well, the northern land is barren, not as plentiful in products and food production as in the south, and the amount that can be hoarded is also limited. Besides, if you move too big, it will alert the glory Holy See. What are you doing? Hoarding a lot of food and grass, do you want to fight a war? Last time the Holy See summoned all the nobles to prepare for a holy war, but your attitude was so passive. Who do you want to fight by hoarding food now? At this moment, the 2 great nobles looked at the winter snow that came earlier than usual, reaching out to catch the snowflakes as big as their palms, each feeling awe-inspiring in their hearts. I hope that the famine next year will not be too serious. I hope that the barbarians will not be so vicious and come to rob indiscriminately. I also hope that their neighbors will be a little clearer and be able to withstand the pressure. The income of the royal family is good this year. King Boi looked at the report sent by the king, his beard curled up, and he couldn't help showing joy. You can order the set of 7th level enchanted armor from the Dwarf Kingdom. You can also add the set of ruby and diamond encrusted jewelry to Thalia's dowry. If you want to be a Carolingian queen, there are few sets that can make a scene. Jewelry is not acceptable. But your majesty, we have received news that there may be a great famine next year. The Saxony territory and the northern border are already stocking grain. Do we want to? Hey, how come there isn't enough food? King Boi waved his hand casually. The Great Plain of Lublin is known as the granary of the eastern continent. The black soil is so fertile. Even if half of the land fails to harvest, it is enough to feed the entire country's citizens. Wang Xiang lowered his head silently, stepped back with the report in hand, and decided to double the warehouse in his territory and store hundreds of tons more grain. While it's still early winter, and the heavy snow has not yet closed the door, hurry up and fill up the granary. Those knights, the little lords, were really short of food and started making trouble. There were holes here and there in the territory, and the orcs came in to grab things and people. If they continued to fight for a year or two, the territory's finances would collapse. By the time the howling cold wind reached the glory holy city, its power had already weakened a lot. There are many churches inside and outside the holy city, there are magical arrays dotted in the churches, and there are the holy lights flashing on the top of the churches. The residents of the holy city only saw a few thin snowflakes. Especially the residents of the inner city, at the very least, are at the level of apprentices, acolytes, and deputy priests. If they are warriors, they are at least third level and fourth level warriors. A gust of cold wind blew, and they shrugged their shoulders, tightened their robes, and pushed through it. There will be a relatively large famine next year. The Pope, the head of the Knights Templar, the Grand Inquisitor, and the leader of the ascetic monks sat together again for a meeting. So are we sure to launch a jihad next year? If there is a famine, it doesn't seem like a good time to start a war. Is the news true? The leader of the ascetic monks frowned slightly. Their faction does not participate in the intrigues of the Holy See. The most important, or even the only, task every day is to use various methods to offer their loyalty to the Lord of Glory. There are some people who were locked up in a small church dug out of the rock, barely large enough to accommodate them, praying devoutly and not moving for 30 years. There are those who walk dozens of miles every day wearing linen clothes and bare feet, carrying buckets of water, fetching spring water from the mountains, and wiping the statues in the cathedral. There are those who go around every village, heal the villagers, and spread the light of God. There are people who close their doors, grow their own food, and eat nothing except the products of their own labor, for decades. The ascetics are devout and powerful, and their belief in the Lord of Radiance is almost fanatical. In contrast, the upper-level information is much less accessible. Unless necessary, the Pope will not ask them to come forward. When the ascetic monks saw the clergy of the Holy See enjoying themselves, drinking and hugging each other, they would really beat and kill people. The old leader of the ascetic monks twisted a string of wooden rosary beads around his neck with a grave expression. If the news is true, it is best not to launch a holy war. Otherwise, my lord's people will suffer too much. The news is very likely. The chief referee, who was sitting diagonally across from the leader of the ascetic monks, said in a deep voice. We got definite news from the nobles of the Kingdom of Kent. It is said that the Queen summoned all the nobles of the royal capital at that time, and the legendary mage was present in person. A golden dragon also flew over, and personally announced the prophecy of famine next year. When did this happen? The leader of the ascetic monks immediately glanced over with a sharp gaze. If the ascetic means pure white in the Holy See, then the Grand Inquisitor almost means pure black. As the leader, he can understand and tolerate the Holy See's need for such an existence, but he can't help feeling disgusted. Mid-year thing. The leader of the ascetic monks condensed his fingertips and crushed a rosary bead with a snap. His drooping eyelids lifted slightly, and his gaze seemed to directly hit a word. Waste. The chief referee was a little embarrassed. Everyone present at the time signed a magic contract and were not allowed to leak the information. We also waited for a long time before a nobleman who was about to reach the end of his life told the matter in a roundabout way. Okay, the Pope had been lowering his eyes slightly, turning a blind eye to the complaints of his subordinates, and then he slowly spoke. That group of heretics have always been cunning, so it's not surprising. Is there any evidence for this news? Yes. Since the middle of the year, the pagan kingdom has been purchasing large quantities of grain, and at the same time using divine magic to promote large quantities of food in the country. In addition, the Duke of Saxony and Count Askin are also hoarding large quantities of grain, suspected of colluding with the pagans. Your Majesty, do you want to punish them? The Pope lowered his eyebrows and bowed his head, silently. Next to him, the leader of the Knights Templar pressed the hilt of his sword and protested. Your Majesty, before the war started, civil strife broke out first, and I think it is inappropriate. I think they should be allowed to prove their piety. Can we collect more evidence, and when the holy war starts, order them to be the vanguard? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Pingming. Buy for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 779. Greed held his cheek and sat in the outpatient building of Oak Grove Medical Research Institute, reading a book and waiting for patients. The first snowfall of the year in Nevis came earlier than usual. Of course, Nevis is right by the sea. The sea breeze is gentle and the climate is peaceful. There is no severe cold in winter or scorching heat in summer. When the wind and snow roll over the mainland, the people of Nevis only feel that the winter rain is pattering, and the duration is getting longer and longer. Even for the urban poor and farmers farming on the outskirts of the city, the most they can do is tighten their thin clothes, then raise their heads and curse. Damn weather. The only ones who really got the exact news were the magicians. The snowflakes rolling down from high in the sky fell on the Star Dome and on the tops of the 8 auxiliary towers surrounding the Babel Tower. Overnight, all 9 mage towers of different shapes were dyed white. Of course, only night owls can see such a scene. The next morning, the large mysterious lock covering the top of Igor Peak was adjusted in time. The howling wind, falling snowflakes, and all the energy contained therein are all filtered and transformed by the mystery lock, and then injected into the great magic circle on the top of Igor Peak. From that day on, Gretel silently moved his working time in the hospital forward by 1 hour in the morning and by 1 hour in the evening. My experience in working in the emergency department is that every time the temperature drops, it is a period of high incidence of cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases. Once the cold air passes through, the number of patients admitted to the chest pain and stroke center can directly double. Fortunately, I have already created the magic of cardioversion and defibrillation. Greed lay on the book and hummed. It is not difficult to connect the magic circle. After reading the few books given by the teacher, it has become a matter of course. What is more difficult is to make the magic automatically judge. What situations require defibrillation? What situations require electrical cardioversion? In what situation does neither of these two options be necessary, and is it better to insist on cardiopulmonary resuscitation? How many joules of energy are used? Should we judge based on the graphic of the electrocardiogram or based on the numerical value? How to write a program? It took less than half a year to collect data and adjust the spells intermittently. Up to now, it can finally be considered basically completed. Help! At the door of the outpatient clinic building, chaotic footsteps and sharp shouts sounded together. Greed quickly came out of the consulting room. Coming. Ah, it was brought in. Gretel hurried over. What's the situation? The first time I glanced at it, I wanted to hold my forehead. 4 strong servants, one behind the other, carried a huge door panel, or should I say bed panel. There was a fat old man lying on his back on the bed. Good guy, the bed was a little bent under his weight. In medical terms, the belly can be described as a distended abdomen, and there is no problem even adding like a full-term pregnancy. Of course, I couldn't see clearly because the old man was covered with a big quilt, which covered most of his outline. My father. He suddenly died. The two knights, well, they should be knights, followed closely, holding onto the bedboard, with anxious faces. After breakfast this morning, he said he was going, well, but then he didn't come out. The personal servant called him and found him lying there, without the strength to get up. This is very subtle. Gretel moved his nose and smelled a familiar smell. So the old man is constipated? Constipation, then blood pressure soars, possible sudden cerebral hemorrhage or something. I got it, don't worry, let me take a look. Greed nodded to comfort the patient's family and threw out a healing spell. At a glance, the patient was pale and sweating profusely. Well, he looked quite critical. But he is still conscious, which is good news. He then reached out to lift the quilt. Even if you are constipated, it does not prevent you from looking at your upper body and listening to your heart and breathing sounds. Correct. What level of knight is your father? Level 8. The two sons answered in unison. Greet exhaled slightly. Thank God, the teacher gave him a piece of Warcraft crystal core before. Otherwise, Sarala would still be sleeping, and he wouldn't even have the light source to do X-rays. He stretched out his hand halfway and then retracted it. The two knights looked embarrassed, one on each side, firmly pressing the corners of the quilt. Greet probably imagined the scene under the quilt and nodded to them. Then let's go into the clinic to see him. The door to the consulting room was closed, and as soon as the quilt was lifted, the stench immediately hit my face. The old man's lower body was naked, lying in the quilt, covered with indescribable objects. As soon as he lifted the quilt, he immediately turned his head inward, his eyes closed tightly, and the veins on his neck throbbed. Probably because the family members were really nervous, they raced against time to bring the patient here without even wiping her or changing her clothes. He was carried into the carriage and rushed all the way to Oak Grove Hospital. Okay, it turned out to be a sudden increase in blood pressure during constipation. It is said that being discovered by a servant and son like this is enough to kill her, and she has to die in front of a doctor. I don't have a thick skin that can resist the fireball spell, I really can't resist it. Gretel is well informed and is well prepared. Ignoring the two knights, they apologized profusely and casually used the cleaning technique. The dirt was swept away and fell into the trash can next to it, and he followed the command. You, go take out the trash. Okay, immediately. The younger knight flew out. The older man, probably the old man's eldest son, couldn't catch up, so he could only stay with his father and answer Greet's questions sentence by sentence. How old is the old man? 67 years old. Have you had any illnesses before? Or any injuries? No serious illness, quite a lot of injuries. In my early years, I had a broken arm, a broken leg, a broken rib, I think my intestines were broken once. Needless to say, Greet also saw an old scar about 30 centimeters long on the old man's right abdomen, which was shocking. As for other injuries, Gretel flew his hands and made a series of spell gestures, checking spells falling like rain. He then wanted to curse. The serum potassium was 2.73 mmol/L, which was lower than the normal value. The serum sodium was 129.4 mmol/L, which was slightly lower than the normal value. The blood pressure is 89/60 mmHg, which is okay, and the pulse is 92 beats/minute. Blood oxygen saturation is 96%. This is obviously a problem. Greet continued to ask about the medical history and learned that the old man suddenly suffered from general weakness an hour ago, his face was pale, and he was sweating profusely, which continued without relief. There was no chest tightness, chest and back pain, no dyspnea, and no edema of both lower limbs. No abdominal pain, bloating, vomiting, headache, dizziness, syncope, fever or other discomfort. The only problem is that the elderly are slow to respond during the medical history inquiry process, making it difficult to ask questions. "Oh, my father was like this 2 months ago." He reacts very slowly. He has to think for a while before he understands anything you say to him. So your father's appearance is really not due to high blood pressure leading to cerebral hemorrhage, or cavity obstruction or something. Forget it, I can't do MRI here either. I did the antigen today, and there was a quarrel over the nucleic acid test in the community next door. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @Uchiha Kentetsu for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 780. There is really no need to count on NMR. Nuclear magnetism requires an extremely strong magnetic environment with uniform direction. Gretel estimated that among the people he knew, if he wanted to find someone who could do it with his hands, he might have to trouble senior sister Philby. Maybe the senior sister won't be able to figure it out, and the Lord of Thunder will have to go into battle himself. But for a legendary mage, you can just rub it once in a while, but you have to cooperate with him in MRI imaging research for many years. Gretel felt that it would be more reliable to work hard to become a legendary mage. Gretel stared at the old knight in front of him and thought quickly. The old man is looking like this now, with a pale face, profuse sweating, and fatigue. From a clinical point of view, this is a very dangerous sign. But what is the most dangerous and closest to death? He took a deep breath and began to examine his body. Well, the old man's jugular veins are not distended, his breath sounds are clear in both lungs, and there are no wet or dry rales in his lower lungs. It seems that his lungs are not bad. The heart boundary expands to the lower left. There is something wrong with the heart, but the heart rhythm is regular and no murmur is heard. There was no edema in both lower limbs, and physical examination of the rest of the abdomen and nervous system showed no obvious abnormalities. I want to check creatinine. Check the blood routine. Check thyroid function, high sensitivity protein, liver function, blood lipids, and blood sugar. Gretel said silently to himself. However, none of these exist and cannot exist. In previous lives, hundreds of years and the efforts of tens of millions of medical workers and basic medical researchers from generation to generation could not be filled up so easily. Forget it, whatever it is useful for. Greet let out a small sigh and waved the EKG. The moment he saw the graphic, his whole body froze and he felt his hair standing on end. What's going on with this electrocardiogram? Why is the voltage in lead I so high? This is an extremely typical electrocardiogram in which hypertensive heart disease causes ventricular hypertrophy. The patient's ventricular hypertrophy is very severe. What medicine does your father usually take? Gretel suddenly turned his head and stared closely at the middle-aged knight who sent his father. What kind of medicine did you take? Or what other treatment did you receive? Or what kind of treatment did you use on the way here? My blood pressure has always been high and my heart is so hypertrophic. My blood pressure is now normal. This is definitely not right. If you take any medicine, such as Baxenthung, Valsartan, etc., it's fine. If you don't take any medicine, be careful, where the blood vessels are broken. And the old man's heart rate is indeed a bit high. 92 beats/min. It can only be said that it is not as fast as hemorrhagic shock. However, As an emergency physician, the old man's situation was enough for him to be extremely vigilant. My father sometimes feels dizzy and takes some herbal medicine. I don't know him very well. The middle-aged knight shook his head repeatedly. Gretel's eyes darkened. What are you afraid of? You don't know it, and neither do I. I'm not familiar with the names of the herbs in this world, and I don't know their effects. Even if I know them, they don't match my previous knowledge structure. But the good thing is, has the old man tried to control his blood pressure before? What else? He stared at the electrocardiogram and took out the magic crystal given by the teacher in his hand, ready to take a look at the chest X-ray. The middle-aged knight looked nervous and thought hard. I used a magic scroll. Yes, it's a scroll of soothing skills. My father was very nervous and in pain before. After using the soothing skills, he seemed to relax. Greet's shoulders also relaxed. The soothing technique is one of the techniques he is very familiar with. It is mainly used to soothe patients' emotions and relieve tension, and it has a certain effect on controlling blood pressure. Greet guessed that the mechanism of this spell might be to relax nerves, relieve vasospasm, and maybe also allow the body to secrete some substances that can antagonize angiotensin. However, with treatment and blood pressure under control, the likelihood of a ruptured blood vessel is greatly reduced. Greet breathed a sigh of relief and handed the magic crystal to the oak staff in his hand, letting it be rolled up with a tree root and turned behind the old knight. Old man, sit up slowly. Greet said softly. The old knight blinked, seeming to be thinking about the meaning of Greet's words. Greet gestured for his son to come over, while helping the old man up one by one, and activated detection magic. The image of the plain X-ray film appears in the meditative field of vision. Gretel only glanced at it, and the blood pressure that had just calmed down surged up again, straight to the top of his head. In the heart area, the upper right part is obviously protruding, with a significant arc shape. The left side is obviously protruding, with a significant arc shape. The ascending aorta is obviously bulging, and the aortic arch is obviously bulging. Such an image can only mean one thing: the ascending aorta has been greatly expanded and is under great pressure. According to Greet's experience in his previous life, if surgery is not performed, dissection or rupture will occur in just a matter of minutes. Old man, I've finished reading. Please lie down slowly. Move slowly, don't rush. Gretel spoke as slowly as possible, bowed forward, supported the old man and spoke slowly. His hands were covered with white light, and he was constantly casting soothing and healing spells. At the same time, he used a ray of peripheral vision to stare at the display of blood pressure magic next to him. Don't raise your blood pressure. Be sure not to rise. Be sure not to rise. The ascending aorta has been dilated like this. Although there is no CT, it feels like an ascending aortic aneurysm, or arterial dissection is not far away. Although the elderly person does not have severe pain in the chest and back, according to his experience, about 10% of clinical patients with aortic dissection do not have severe pain. In comparison, images are more reliable. His heart was beating fast, but he still had to keep a smile on his face and his tone was calm, light and slow. This attitude is a required course for every emergency doctor. Even if you are anxious to death, your face should not show even a little bit. If you are nervous, the patient will be even more nervous. When the patient becomes nervous, his blood pressure will soar, and he will die. After receiving his look, the old knight's two sons also quickly came over to help him. One on each side helped their father lie down, while the younger one was busy pulling up the old knight's clothes and covering him with the quilt. The middle-aged knight took 2 steps to the side and asked worriedly. Mage Nordmark, our father. Gretel waved his hand and pulled out a wind barrier to block out the sound. Then, staring closely at the display of the electrocardiogram cloud screen and the magic blood pressure monitor, he whispered. The situation is very bad. I need to conduct more tests to clarify the cause. As far as the current situation is concerned, it is very likely that life will be in danger at any time. Don't move. On the other side of the wind barrier, the old knight waved his arms twice, pushed his son away violently, and turned over to the ground. Gretel's forehead buzzed, and he didn't even have time to dispel the wind barrier, so he pounced directly. With a soft popping sound, the mage armor on the endless ink pen popped out naturally, protecting him through the wind barrier without being scratched and bloody. However, even so, what Greet received was only the old man's slowly falling body. The old knight fell down the moment he stood up. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 781. Chapter 780. Aortic rupture. Don't perform cardiac compressions. Wipe. Greet cursed loudly and fell to his knees. There was a sharp voice in the ear, the electrocardiogram cloud screen, and the blood pressure magic, both of which called the police together. The sharp beeping sound was so loud that it almost formed a straight line. Arrhythmia. Arrhythmia. Blood pressure 70/50ths. 60/30ths. High pressure is 35, low pressure is undetectable. I go. I go. I go. Suspected aortic dissection, aortic aneurysm, body position change, sudden collapse, arrhythmia, sudden drop in blood pressure. So why did the patient collapse? Postural changes cause blood pressure to rise, receptors to overoperate, and blood pressure to drop sharply. Heart stuffing? Or the most terrifying thing, aortic rupture and massive bleeding? Gretel stared at the electrocardiogram, thinking quickly. One by one, one on the left and one on the right, two knights had already rushed forward to catch their father. Panicking and shaking vigorously. Father! Father, what's wrong with you? Wake up! How to rescue? By the way, how to rescue? External cardiac compression? I'll do it. While speaking, he had already laid the old knight down, unbuttoned his chest clothes, and turned his head to one side. Testing his breathing and feeling his carotid arteries, Greet was so skillful that he was certain of one thing. After the Temple of the God of War took his first aid manual, it did provide sufficient training to the warriors, at least to the knights. People who have never practiced would never think of opening the airway. The two knights looked at each other, one folded his hands, stretched his arms, and was ready to attack. The other palm rested on the ground, and he rose from his kneeling position, passed over the old knight, and turned his knees to the opposite side of him. It looked like he was ready to take over at any moment. If it were other circumstances, Gretel would be very happy to have two trained toolmen willing to take over. He doesn't have to press it himself. He doesn't even need to use magic to press it himself. CPR, before magic, would kill half of his life every time. But not this time. Gretel roared angrily, waved his arm, and threw it directly at the middle-aged knight. Don't touch him. He will die if you press him like this. Aortic dissection. Dissection occurs, which means that the aorta, which has a three-layer structure, is repeatedly stretched under excessive pressure, and the three-layer connective tissue structure tears. The inner layer of the aortic blood vessel is damaged, and the blood flows into the wrong place and enters between the inner layer and the middle layer of the blood vessel wall. In Greet's previous life, he had heard of the largest aortic dissection, which tore from the thoracic aorta to the abdominal aorta, almost to the iliac artery. External cardiac compressions will put an extra huge amount of pressure on the heart. It is already very fragile. Only one or two layers of the aorta are exposed to the outside world. If they receive this pressure, if they are unlucky, even the outermost layer will rupture. Once it ruptures, there will be massive bleeding. The blood pumped from the heart passes through the aorta and flows directly into the chest or abdominal cavity. Within a minute or two, all the blood was gone, and there was no way to save him. Of course, there are also family members who strongly request chest compressions. Greet himself had also answered questions from junior doctors. I have an aortic dissection and my heartbeat is gone. Do I need to press the button? According to the disease itself, compression is of no benefit, but according to the rescue of cardiac arrest, it is absolutely wrong not to perform compression, and the family members will think that you have not fulfilled your rescue responsibility. Fortunately, it is not the case at the moment. The two knights were quite obedient and stopped immediately after being yelled at. Only the younger knight asked softly, "Then what should we do?" Gretel first fired a shot of treat serious injury, a healing technique, an emergency first aid method, which has miraculous effects in increasing blood pressure, stabilizing heart rate, and stabilizing vital signs. Then he stretched out his hand to wave the oak staff and moved forward. Under the green leaves at the head of the staff, the little snake turned into a stream of light and pounced directly into the old knight's body. Gretel closed his eyes slightly, connected to the perspective of the little snake, and guided it forward quickly. Chest wall. Rib cage. Pericardium. At this time, the direct detection of contract spirit is more effective than CT, enhanced CT, and bedside cardiac color ultrasound. The important thing is that it can be seen directly. In the illusory eyes of the contract spirit, he saw that his pericardium was abnormally enlarged. Going further in, is there pericardial tamponade? No, thank God. Although there is a fusion in the pericardium, it is not to the extent of tamponade. This means that the dissection did not break into the pericardium, causing pericardial tamponade, which compressed the heart and prevented it from beating. If it really gets to this point, like the orc did last time, he will open his chest, cut his pericardium to decompress, and perform heart compressions under direct vision. Greet had no idea whether a patient with aortic dissection could be saved by doing this. He directed the little snake to make a circle around the two atria and ventricles. Except for the fact that the ventricles were thick as expected, everything else was fine. Then go up along the ascending aorta. Let me go. What a big breach! With every beat of the heart, bright red blood shoots out and goes straight into the chest. In these 2 sentences, the patient lost so much blood that he was already in critical condition. Gretel took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Don't worry, this is not the past life. By the time the stent is removed or the thoracotomy is sutured, the patient will be dead. With treatment, there is hope to plug this breach. He stretched out his palm again and pressed down gently. In the palm of his hand, a dense white light fell into the old man's chest and continued to sink. Treat serious injuries. Rely on you. Gretel concentrated her mental power and tried her best to ensure that the healing technique would not be scattered. It's to the heart, don't run around. Don't get distracted. There is no point in keeping the heart beating now. It is true that we should close the breach quickly. The incorporeal spirit of the contract swam silently in the old man's chest, leading the healing technique forward. It's arrived, it's reached the rupture of the ascending aorta, the 2 sides are covered, let it grow toward the middle. Hurry up! In his elusive eyes, the tear in the ascending aorta quickly climbed from both sides to the center. 2 centimeters, 1 centimeter, 5 millimeters, combined. But it's not enough. Only the last layer of the tough 3-layer aortic intima is left. It cannot withstand the huge pressure of the heart. Gretel glanced at the electrocardiogram and blood pressure monitor, calmed down, and directed the snake to turn around and descend. Is it possible for the torn aortic intima to grow back into place? Use healing techniques to cultivate it, and let it continue to climb up and return to the aorta. Gretel never knew that such meticulous use of healing techniques would be such a huge test for his mental strength. The mental power leaked out like a gate was opened, directing the blood vessels to grow little by little, and guiding the cells to arrange themselves in the way they needed. Fortunately, when he was building the meditation core before, he had recalled the construction of the aorta over and over again. Inside the humanoid figure of light, a dense and elastic powerful blood vessel was built layer by layer, covered by 3 layers of connective tissue. Now, it's just a matter of doing it all over again. All right? Got a ride? Long time together. The little snake continued to go down and found the end point of the aortic tear, cut it open, release the blood in the false cavity, and increase the blood volume. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Medicine is so difficult, everyone who can handle medicine is a big shot. Thanks to @Gion11 for the 500 starting coin reward. There was a family downstairs that ran out of toothpaste. I asked for toothpaste in the community group and was willing to exchange 6 boxes of Vitasoy. Our family supported the toothpaste and told him that he didn't need Vitasoy, but he still put Vitasoy at my door. Already. However, no one in our family drinks Vitasoy, in a daze.